Hello, my friends. Thank you so much for hitting play on the Fertility Confidence podcast. Today, I'm answering all of your questions that you have about caffeine. Everyone wants to know, can I still drink my coffee? Should I not be drinking my coffee? Do I have to give it up? What does that look like? So, today, I'm going to break it down for you, okay? Because I think coffee honestly gets a really bad rap in health in general. And I think what we need to actually be looking at and asking ourselves is less about the caffeine in the coffee and more about the reasons why we are so addicted. So let's get into it. I think there's a lot of fear around caffeine, right? It's definitely one of the questions we get asked off the hop with all of our Fertility Confidence Method clients who are joining in. It's a question we ask on our intake form. How much caffeine are you drinking? And a lot of times when we ask people on clarity calls, like, what have you done so far to help support your fertility? People are telling us, well, I gave up caffeine. And they think that that's maybe something that they absolutely have to do, but perhaps it's also not. So the short answer to this podcast, we could literally cut it off after this, is that there's actually really no research showing a negative impact to conception, so to the female body ability to conceive. There is no negative impact. However, there is some data showing a slight increase in miscarriage risk when caffeine over 200 milligrams per day is consumed. So we can't sit here and say there's no impact to fertility if it's potentially increasing your miscarriage risk, but it is very dose dependent. So the data did not find, and it was looking at retrospectively, right? Women who've had miscarriage, and then how much coffee did you drink through early pregnancy? And were we seeing trends? And so the trend that they were seeing is that the women who drank more than 200 milligrams of caffeine a day were more likely to have a miscarriage versus the women who were less than 100 milligrams or 200 milligrams of caffeine per day. Now, there's a couple of things to think about here. So one, the dose dependency, okay? Your 1 cup of coffee a day is not likely close to 200 milligrams of caffeine, asterisks, depending on the size, right? Because it's all about how much are you drinking. And we'll talk about options at the end as well. So depending on the size, you probably aren't getting anywhere close to that, which then in turn means, does your 1 cup of coffee in the morning that brings you the utmost joy and makes you feel so good and you love it and it's a part of your ritual and your routine, do you have to cut that out in order to get pregnant? No. If you are someone who is having recurrent unexplained pregnancy loss and you are drinking close to that 200 milligrams of caffeine a day, would we be having a different conversation with you? Probably, yeah. We got to look at this from a very personalized lens, because the other issue with this research and data is it's very, very challenging to experiment with this and research it in a vacuum, right? These women that they're going back and saying, yo, how much caffeine did you drink when you had your miscarriage? They're trying to remove other variables. So they'll try to get women who are all around the same age or all around the same ethnicity to try and control for other aspects, but it's not a perfect system either. And so there's mixed in to these data results and data points are going to be women who had a miscarriage for another reason, right? We can't always fully place the blame on caffeine. So that's why with our FCM clients, we generally follow this 200 milligram rule. So we do not tell you need to cut it out completely. For the most part, I would say over, let's say, the last few weeks, the plans that I've made, I haven't come across someone that's drinking multiple cups of coffee a day. But it used to be very, very common, right? And we'd have to sit down and say, listen, we don't need you to stop drinking coffee completely, but your pot of coffee you're drinking, maybe might be a little bit too much. So we got to look at the dose. And we also, I think for me, it really does come down to this, our 2025 motto, which if you've been listening to the podcast, you'll definitely heard me say this before, this idea of you don't need to be perfect to get pregnant. And I think that all these little things that are like, you need to cut this, cut that, cut this, cut that, but we're not replacing, cut sugar, cut gluten, cut dairy, cut caffeine, cut alcohol, cut fun, cut joy. Don't do anything. Just sit there and think fertile thoughts. Like, we are creating this environment that isn't actually conducive to conception, like in certain ways, because I am of the belief that this really strong restrictive environment, we're going to have an energetic ripple effect with that in other areas of life as well. And it also comes down to, I think, this very strong need for control. And if you're like, ooh, yeah, that's me, no shame in that game, because hey, guess what? That's me too, right? We talked about this. I ran a live webinar last week where it was all about unexplained infertility, explaining unexplained infertility. If you want the replay, you can go to ttc.kelseyduncan.com/unexplained infertility and sign up, and you'll get the replay email over sent to you. But we talked about how one of the biggest aspects of infertility that's such a struggle is the lack of control, because most of us are type A control freaks, right? If you're searching and researching and digging for data and looking for answers, it's because of that, likely 90% of the time. And I'm not saying that is a bad thing. It's just it's who we are as people, right? It's just who we are. And my belief is especially when we already have that tendency, then we want to that's when the restrictive nature really comes into play. And there can be a lot of negative backlash to that, especially when it comes to restrictive nutrition. If you haven't listened to the hypothalamic amenorrhea episode with Victoria Myers, I highly recommend it. And I'll pop a link in the show notes for you to check it out. Maybe you don't have HA and that premise doesn't really relate to you, but I think we do a really good job kind of navigating that aspect of restrictive dieting and how that can actually have a negative side effect. And so we see this too in our fertility population, women who are very restrictive and very overanalyzing all the things. And I'm here to tell you, this is so way far out of the caffeine conversation I had planned for today, but clearly one of you listening needs to hear this. I just really want you to know that, like, I see you in that, and you're not alone, because I see it in all of my clients. If I could just wave a magic wand and you have a piece of paper in front of you that's like, these are all the reasons you're not getting pregnant, and this is how you fix it. Like, who wouldn't sign up for that, right? And of course you want answers, and of course you want solutions, and of course you want control, because you wanted a baby yesterday and the day before that and the day before that. That makes sense. And so how this kind of circles back around to the caffeine conversation is, if your warm cup of coffee brings you joy in the morning and you're cutting it out because you think that one cup of coffee might be the reason you're not getting pregnant, that is just a little area of control that we need to practice releasing, because you're not going to be able to release all of the desire for control. Trust me, as a fellow control freak, I'm here to say that is going to be a challenge, but the best way to do it, to be able to be present and lean into the moment and breathe and allow the universe to help you, and just relinquishing some of that tight control power that we're having through this journey, is to take the little steps in other areas of your life where it is easy to let go. It is easy to relinquish that control. And you guys, caffeine, if you've been really restrictive, I'm telling you, this is a very easy area to say, welcome back, cup of coffee. How I have missed and loved you so. Okay. 200 milligrams of caffeine is actually a lot. So I tend to tell people, like, let's not go over 150. All right. Let's be a little extra cautious. That's probably going to make you feel better. We'll stick under 200. We won't butt up against the 200, but we've got wiggle room here. And so what does 200 milligrams of coffee actually, or caffeine actually look like? An 8-ounce cup of coffee, which I wish I brought a measuring cup down. I'm surrounded by coffee mugs. Okay, here, if you're listening to the podcast, this isn't going to help you, but if you're listening to, or you're watching this on YouTube, this will help you a little bit because I actually have 2 different size mugs here. 8 ounces of coffee is not actually all that much if you measure it out. Most of us are probably drinking slightly more than, coffee drinkers are usually drinking slightly more than 8 ounces of coffee a day. So this was my coffee mug this morning. It's not overtly large. It's what I would consider a very normal size cup of coffee, but this is actually like what a standard mug size is. If you're watching the video, like it's not that much bigger, but it is bigger. Now, I also use an espresso machine. I also drink decaf coffee. So there's a teensy weensy bit of caffeine in decaf, but like not a lot at all. So when I make an espresso in this pink mug, for example, which are very obviously standard regulated sizes, it's really only going up about probably 3/4 of the way, maybe even a little less than that. Like let's say maybe 2/3, which in this mug, it is going pretty much to the tippy top. So it's also about your mug size, right? If you were like, oh, I only have 1 cup of coffee a day, but you're having like a standard 24-ounce Yeti size cup of coffee, that's very different than, well, actually, those Yetis probably aren't 24 ounces. That's quite big, but maybe that's actually very different. I actually have a little Yeti cup over here. Please hold. I'm sure it tells me on the bottom. 10 ounces. So like the little coffee Yeti. I'm literally spoiling all my secrets over here because I clearly just showed you 3 dirty mugs. So now you know what my office looks like sometimes. Tyler's going to die when he edits this because he's always like, take your mugs upstairs. Especially right now, I'm complaining I don't have any mugs. So this one's 10 ounces. And so yeah, the Nespresso like pretty much fills this to the brim. So that would mean like a normal, these are about the same size, probably about 10 ounces if you're filling it to the brim. So 8 ounces is the standard coffee cup size, and the type of beans you use and how you brew it matters. So the range being between 80 to 120 milligrams of caffeine, depending on. So if you make your coffee at home, you can usually figure that out from the bag, like how caffeine percentage and yada, yada. If you drink a Starbucks or Tim Hortons or what have you, they're usually listed online. Espresso actually has less caffeine than a drip coffee. And then I can't remember, I think dark roast is less caffeinated than light roast, if I'm not mistaken, but that would be something to look up. So it depends on what you drink, but that we're ranging in that 1 cup of coffee being, let's say, about 100 milligrams of caffeine. So that one, even if you go to that 10 ounce size, we're getting maybe about 100, 110 milligrams of caffeine, depending on what you're using and brewing. That's well under that 200 size. And if you drink a smaller cup of coffee, hey, now you can have 2, right? So I always would recommend, if you are someone who's drinking like a travel mug on your way to work, measure it out. How much are you actually getting? And making sure that we're figuring out the caffeine content of the beans that you're using and that we're sticking under that 200 milligrams of caffeine. Okay. If you are a tea drinker, tea has less caffeine than coffee. So 8 ounces of black tea is about 40 to 60 milligrams of caffeine, and 8 ounces of green tea being even less at 20 to 40 milligrams of caffeine. So a little bit more flexibility if you want to have multiple cups of tea. Green tea, also high in EGCG, which is a great antioxidant for egg quality. It's good for fibroids and endometriosis. However, from a tea, are we getting enough for those things? Like, honestly, probably not, but there's a little bit of side benefit to that as well. From a male side of things, there is data that looks at men who drank pop or soda and energy drinks did see a detriment to their sperm quality and count, but did not see that same change with tea and coffee. So Is it the caffeine? Honest to goodness, probably not. It's likely more the sugar and other ingredients that they're getting from the pop and the energy drinks, especially the energy drinks. Energy drinks also typically, if you're an energy drink drinker, you're likely getting well over that 200 milligrams of caffeine. So the data for men is a little bit like meh, but I always kind of look at it and treat it the same as women of like, well, let's stick under the 200 milligrams. Okay. The other thing we want to think about is it's not necessarily the caffeine for me from a overarching fertility foundation lens, but what actually is your coffee? I personally love my decaf Nespresso with just a little bit of milk. That's all I put in it. For a long time, I drank just black coffee. And then I realized, like, why am I even drinking this? This, isn't even really all that great. It's much better when it has a little bit of milk in it. And so I went back to a little bit of milk. I drank black coffee because I thought it was healthier. Let's be honest. That's exactly why I did it. I figured if I'm going to drink coffee, it's going to be black. But then you get to a point even where you're like, why the heck am I drinking this? This literally tastes like licking a garbage bag. So I put a little bit of milk in my coffee. I don't drink milk in any other kind of instance, but that a little bit of milk, it's like ends up being probably a tablespoon, not even a tablespoon, depending if I have 2 cups or on Sundays I have 3, it'll be a little bit more. But what are you putting in your coffee? Are you just drinking hot cream with sugar? Because that's a very different conversation, right? Again, 1 cup a day is really probably not the end of the world. But if you have insulin resistance, if you have elevated hemoglobin A1C, if you're trying to lose weight, if we're trying to balance your hormones and you're someone who's putting 2-3 heaping scoops of sugar into your coffee and then wondering why your inositol is not working, those 2 things don't really go together, right? Life is meant to be sweet. I'm of the belief that we shouldn't have to cut out everything and all the things that are sweet in our lives, but sugar in our coffee is a really easy way to decrease the sugar in our day-to-day life. And so looking at, okay, I drink coffee. I only have 2 cups a day, or I have 1 big cup a day. Let's look at portion size, but then also let's look at ingredients, because if you are basically just drinking hot, creamy sugar, that's very different in terms of health foundations. The other thing I want you to think about, caffeine is very addicting. So like I said, I only drink decaf now. I drank caffeine for a very long time. All through high school, pretty much all I drank was coffee. I would drink like 5, 6, 7 coffees a day. And it didn't bother me. And I've actually done genetic testing that shows that I metabolize caffeine very, very quickly, very, very well. So I could have had a coffee at night and gone right to bed. Like I would drink coffee while I was studying in university, no issues, go home and go to sleep. After I had my children, specifically my second or my first, caffeine just started to not feel good. I was getting really jittery, really like I'd get nauseous and sweaty. And I was just like, wow, I can't drink this anymore. And I've been like that ever since. It's definitely an adrenal nervous system thing for me because I know I actually genetically metabolize the caffeine very, very well. And the odd time I've like had a caffeinated beverage or had some caffeine just to see how I feel. Sometimes I tolerate it and sometimes I don't. But I will be honest, I do have a coffee every morning because getting up and having like that warm, yummy drink, like I just love it. I love coffee, but not having to have it because if I didn't, I was going to get a debilitating migraine for the rest of the day. Let me tell you, it is so nice. It's so, so nice because I used to be that person that was like, I cannot function. I cannot do anything unless I've had a coffee. And if I don't have a coffee within an hour, I'm going to feel like shit. So not having to rely on it is really nice. So also thinking about that, the caffeine from a habit perspective do you feel like you need caffeine to survive the day? Are you someone that in the afternoon is like, if I don't have my coffee, like I'm not getting anything else done. I'm not doing any work. I would rather be on the couch sleeping unless I have this. That's something we want to talk about. What is it potentially masking? Is it potentially telling us that there is something wrong with your adrenals or your thyroid, or we having nutrient deficiencies, or what is going on? Like, why do you need it beyond just like an addiction, like, do you need it because of your energy? Then we want to have that conversation more from a fertility focused lens of like, well, what could this potentially be actually telling us? So those are some of the questions we want to ask ourselves. But a big thing for me from a fertility aspect is that we are not eliminating every single thing that brings you joy in your life in the hopes of making a baby. Because let me tell you this, if you do not have any joy in your current present life, you likely won't make a baby. So if you love coffee and it makes you feel good and you miss it because you've cut it out thinking that that would help you, but 1 cup a day sounds really lovely for you, this is your permission slip to add that back in. Make it a healthier version if you were someone that liked like a really high fat, high sugar Starbucks drink, for example. But know that like that isn't a huge detriment in moderation. If you are someone that's like, oh, damn, I am the whole pot of coffee a day person, like I drink an entire pot of coffee, like we're having a different conversation here. Yes, you can still have a little bit of coffee, but maybe, just maybe, we should start to work on bringing that down and go slow, because cutting coffee out doesn't feel so good, right? If your body's used to that much caffeine, you are going to feel when you have to cut it out. And so making sure that you're replacing other fluids in there. That's the other thing I will say is caffeine is a diuretic. So yes, we're getting water from the coffee, but you also tend to pee quicker and faster when you're drinking caffeine. So we don't count that as fluids. So if you are only drinking caffeinated beverages through the day, that's another reason why we want to cut that back, and we want to get more hydrating fluids into you. Herbal tea, no caffeine, does count as water. So if you're sick of plain water, that could be something cool to help bump that up. If you're someone who currently has been living off of a caffeine coffee in the afternoon, swap that out for a decaf to start. You're going to still get a little tiny bit of caffeine from that, but you're going to keep the ritual to like help trick your body, and then you can slowly rein that in a little bit once you're feeling good and supported. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys. I hope that it takes a little bit of the pressure off of feeling like you need to take out things that honestly maybe you just don't need to take out. And I'll also say that if it feels good for you to cut it out and that's supportive for you, like that's okay too, right? This is your journey. I'm just here to share some of the research to help you make the most impactful clinical decisions that you can. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next week.